Good evening, Mr. Blevins. I wanted to do a response video to yours, I guess because your reference to Entwistle 2015 was refreshing for me. It reminded me of how when I came into this program, that's one of the first texts that I read. And during that time, I held a very secular view on things. I hadn't given my life to God. I saw psychology from a very worldly view, let me justify everything with biology or hereditary or just a different worldview than I have now. But I remember in that text, the allies model that you're speaking of, and how that really opened up my mind, how the two could coexist. And I think that does go along with this week's question about how Christians view abnormality versus how the secular view of it, and how they're different. And even though they're different, there is a mutual ground where both can exist together. And Entwistle not only talked about that allies model, but talked about the importance of not only God's word, but God's works. And so for people that hold a very Christian worldview, sometimes they could, I guess, not really acknowledge God's works and hyper-focus on God's word. And as a new Christian, in the beginning, all I wanted to do was read God's word. Anything else to me felt irrelevant, to the point that there were sometimes I didn't even want to work on my studies for school because I didn't want to read anything that was taken away from God's word. But just you referencing that reminded me of how important God's works are too, and how both are useful. And when the two come together, amazing things can be accomplished. It doesn't have to just be one or the other. And even though they view things very differently, there can be a common ground. So I wanted to reply to your video just saying that for me personally, I got something out of it, and it further added to this discussion for me. It's something that now I want to go back and pull out that textbook, since I keep them all, and just refresh myself. Now that I have a different worldview, now that I'm, saved and a woman of God, how differently I see things, and how even reading something as simple as an old text could just change just the way that I view things. So thank you for that.